My brother stood at the head of the mahogany conference table, tossed a piece of paper in front of me, and sneered. "You're not our father's real daughter, Tracy. Only blood relatives deserve the family fortune, so you are officially cut out of grandmother's will." He thought he had completely destroyed my life, but I just looked him dead in the eye and asked, "Do you promise to keep your word about that? Only true blood relatives get the estate?" He smiled arrogantly and said, "I absolutely promise." He even signed the legal waiver right then and there, thinking he had won everything. But the massive surprise came just a few weeks later at the final probate hearing. When the true DNA test results and grandmother's hidden asset clauses were read aloud, his face went completely pale. He realized his greed had just walked him into a multi-million-dollar trap. My name is Tracy, and at 31 years old, I learned exactly how cruel your own flesh and blood can be when millions of dollars are on the line. The funeral flowers for my grandmother had barely begun to wither when the true nightmare started. We were gathered in her old estate's library, the scent of aged paper and polished mahogany filling the tense, quiet air. I sat near the window, still numb from grief, while my brother Austin paced the room like a wolf tracking its prey. Suddenly, he stopped, pulled a manila folder from his jacket, and tossed a piece of paper right in front of me. "You're not our father's real daughter, Tracy," he sneered, his voice ringing with a cold, terrifying malice. "And because of that, you are officially cut out of grandmother's will." He pointed to a preliminary genetic report on the table, a smug, arrogant grin spreading across his face as he looked down at me. He genuinely believed that this sudden, humiliating bombshell would completely destroy my life and leave me begging for scraps. Before we go any further into how I turned his own trap against him, I'm incredibly curious to see who is following this journey with me today. Please take a quick moment to follow my story until the end and comment the city you are watching from, so I can see exactly how far my story has reached across the world. Austin leaned over the desk, his knuckles pressing into the wood as he aggressively detailed the terms of grandmother's massive estate. His eyes gleamed with a toxic mix of greed and triumph. He tapped the paper forcefully, making sure everyone in the room heard his next words as he loudly declared the exact rule he wanted to enforce. "Only blood relatives deserve the family fortune." He stood tall, waiting for me to break down, cry, or beg for mercy. But instead of throwing a tantrum or screaming at his blatant cruelty, I played along seamlessly. I looked down, letting my shoulders slump as if I were a completely broken, wounded, and defenseless woman who had just lost everything. I took a slow, deep breath, looked him right in the eye, and asked the crucial question that would seal his fate. "Do you promise to keep your word about it then? Do you promise that absolutely only true biological blood relatives get to inherit this estate?" Austin laughed, a confident, arrogant sound that echoed through the quiet library. He looked at me with pure disdain and proudly shouted, "Yes, I absolutely promise." He thought he was putting the final nail in my coffin, completely unaware that he had just walked right into a massive trap. I silently committed his promise to memory, knowing a deeply buried secret about our family history that he had completely and utterly overlooked. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept my head down and launched a completely private investigation into our family's past. Austin assumed I was hiding away in despair, but instead, I was methodically digging through old medical records and dusty storage boxes. It didn't take long to uncover that my brother had deliberately manipulated our late father's old hospital files to manufacture his false case against me. But as I searched deeper, I discovered something else. Something so staggering it completely took my breath away. Hidden safely inside a locked drawer that belonged to grandmother, I found the real, certified biological laboratory results from decades ago. As I read the official documents, my jaw dropped. I was 100% our father's biological daughter. The true twist, however, was about Austin. The medical records explicitly stated that after years of struggling with severe fertility issues, our parents had secretly adopted Austin as an infant. They had buried the adoption papers and protected the secret his entire life so he would never feel like an outsider. Austin had spent his whole life walking around with an unearned sense of superiority, completely oblivious to his own biological status. He was so blinded by his malicious desire to erase me that he never bothered to check his own history. He had just demanded an ironclad rule that would completely backfire on him, and I held the absolute proof right in my hands. Armed with the explosive truth, I immediately scheduled a meeting with my grandmother's trusted, low-profile estate attorney, a man who had managed her private affairs for decades. Sitting in his quiet office, away from the prying eyes of Austin's expensive legal team, I laid out the certified adoption records and the real DNA results. The attorney, Mr. Vance, looked at the documents, sighed softly, and then a knowing smile spread across his face. He leaned forward and revealed that grandmother had known all along about Austin's growing greed, entitlement, and toxic ambition. She had anticipated that he might try something malicious after her passing. Because of this, she had purposely structured her last will and testament with a strict, ironclad provision called the Bloodline Contingency Clause. The attorney opened her file and read the exact legal wording to me. The clause explicitly stated that if any heir ever legally challenged another sibling's right to inherit based on biological relation, the entire distribution structure of the estate would instantly change. The entirety of the family fortune would automatically default only to the proven, verified biological descendants of our father. Furthermore, any non-biological party who initiated such a cruel challenge would not only be completely disqualified from receiving a single cent, but they would also legally inherit all of the estate's massive outstanding commercial restructuring debts. Grandmother had built a flawless psychological trap. She knew Austin's arrogance would eventually drive him to try and erase me, and she ensured that his own weapon would be his ultimate undoing. I left Mr. Vance's office feeling a profound sense of relief, ready for the final showdown. The day of the final probate hearing arrived, enveloping the courthouse corridors in a heavy, suffocating tension. Austin strutted into the courtroom looking incredibly smug, flanked by a team of high-priced, aggressive attorneys who looked ready to tear me to pieces. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the absolute certainty of a man who believed he was about to officially strip me of my inheritance and claim millions. As we took our seats at the mahogany tables, Austin didn't even look at me. He just stared ahead, a mocking smile playing on his lips. When the judge called the case, Austin's lead lawyer, Mr. Sterling, stood up with theatrical flair, loudly presenting the altered paperwork and the misleading genetic reports to the court, demanding my immediate removal from the will. For several minutes, they dominated the room, painting a picture of me as an outsider who had no right to the family legacy. I sat perfectly still, keeping my face completely blank and emotionless, letting them dig their own grave deeper and deeper. Austin leaned back in his chair, practically radiating triumph. But the moment they finished their dramatic presentation, Mr. Vance calmly stood up. Without raising his voice, he walked over to the judge's bench and quietly submitted a new, sealed folder. Inside were the definitive, certified historical family records, the true medical files, and the official execution order for grandmother's bloodline contingency clause. The atmosphere in the courtroom instantly shifted from arrogant celebration to a dead, freezing silence as the judge began to methodically review the fresh evidence. The judge methodically read through the certified documents, the courtroom descending into a suffocating, heavy silence. I kept my eyes fixed on Austin, watching as the final, definitive decree was prepared. The judge cleared his throat, looked down from the bench, and began to read the court's ultimate ruling aloud. He detailed the exact terms of grandmother's strict bloodline contingency clause, explaining that because a formal challenge regarding biological relation had been launched, the clause was now fully activated. As the legal reality of those words slowly sank into the room, Austin's arrogant, mocking smile completely vanished. In a matter of seconds, his face went pale as a ghost. The judge calmly explained that because Austin had strictly demanded that only biological blood relatives could inherit the family fortune, and because he had signed a legal waiver explicitly promising to uphold that exact rule, his own biological status had been heavily scrutinized. The true certified medical records proved that he was actually the one who was adopted. Therefore, by his own absolute insistence and the ironclad rules of the will, Austin was completely and utterly disqualified from receiving a single cent of the inheritance. The entire multi-million-dollar estate defaulted solely to me. To deliver the final crushing blow, the judge announced that the legal trap shifted all of the estate's massive outstanding commercial restructuring debts directly onto Austin's shoulders. He sat there frozen, completely ruined by his own malicious loophole. 3 months later, I am successfully managing grandmother's true legacy, watching the sun rise over the beautiful grounds of her estate. I have used a significant portion of the inheritance to fund family justice initiatives, helping vulnerable people who are being financially bullied by greedy relatives. Austin was left completely broke, drowning in the massive commercial restructuring debts he inherited through his own malicious loophole. He had to sell his luxury car, his expensive suits, and his apartment just to keep the creditors from putting him in jail. He is currently working a low-paying job, finally learning what it means to actually earn a living instead of trying to steal from others. Grandmother's wisdom saved me, and her memory pushes me forward every single day. Now, I'm dying to know how you would handle a situation this wild. If your own brother looked you in the eye and tried to rewrite your entire history just to steal your future, would you have the patience to play the long game like I did? Or would you have flipped the table right then and there? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. Before you go, make sure to click on the video appearing on your screen right now. It is easily one of the most requested stories on the channel, and trust me, the jaw-dropping reveal at the very end is something you will never see coming. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the very last second, and I'll see you in the next story.